But with that said, I'm going to let Dan come back up here and introduce his panel.
Thank you, Brett. All right, you guys want to come up here? Okay, these all work. All right. Is everybody awake? I know it was lunchtime. It's hot in here. Who wants to do an ICO? We got one guy in the back. He's going to do... Oh, we got 2 people.
We got 3 people.
3 people. Okay. Well, I'm following what? Oh, man. Yeah, we're not going to talk about any of that. Well, we might talk about a little bit of it, right, Mason? Yeah. Okay, so again, I'm repeating myself, but my name is Daniel Kari. I am the co-founder and CEO of Pactum Capital. We are a financial services firm. We work with ICOs, we work with cryptocurrency companies, accredited investors, institutions, so on and so forth. And right next to me is Salman Habib. He is the project lead for something called HelloFriend. It is a social network built on cryptocurrencies. And then I have Mason Borda. He is the CEO of TokenSoft. They do regulated ICOs, and I'll let him talk more about what his firm does. It is a software as a service firm. So we'll start out with Mason. We'll start with you. Talk more about what TokenSoft does and explain to folks why what you do is important for the industry. And yeah, I think you're a good source of information on this.
Yeah, so we basically have a tech platform that when people want to run an ICO, they have their purchasers go through that platform, and it helps them stay in regulations in whatever jurisdiction they want to launch in. So I think the projects we're doing that have the largest scope right now we're doing 2 funds that are doing ICOs, and we're helping them adhere to regulations in over 50 countries. So those are the kinds of things we do. We basically make sure that these companies that are doing ICOs are doing exactly what their lawyers want them to do in terms of the global regulations and domestic regulations as well.
Salman, do you want to explain what HelloFriend is and what you guys are doing?
Just a quick note, I lost my voice on the way here from Boston. So especially the A vowel, so you'll hear me sort of skip A during my conversation. So me and my brother co-founded HelloFriend 2 years ago. It's a platform that is a social networking platform built on blockchain where you can buy and sell social experiences around the globe. And the reason why sort of we got into blockchain, among other many reasons, is because what we early on realized was that blockchain has been very much focused on the protocols and not so much on the application side. And that's what we're trying to do at HelloFriend. We're using blockchain, using cryptocurrency, taking it out to the mainstream, targeting college students early on, and in the hopes that we can truly mainstream this technology.
So I'm working with both of these projects. Mason's firm, we work with some of the folks that he works with, and then I'm advising HelloFriend. Just as a caveat there. So I want to look. Okay, I know there was a regulation panel, but again, I do want to speak a little bit about Mason. If you could be a little bit more explicit on sort of what you look for in projects and sort of the structure that you require for someone to use TokenSoft.
Yeah, so I think especially like in times where like regulations are like sorting themselves out. So I think several years ago we were trying to figure out banking regulations and how they adhere to crypto, and now we're trying to figure out how securities regulations adhere to the world of crypto. And so sort of the one thing that we require, is kind of the make or break for companies that are doing ICOs, is that they are working with a good law firm that actually understands securities issues, and hopefully they have a securities lawyer on the team as well. Because if they work with any other type of lawyer, because I know it's like a hot space, everyone's trying to work on these projects, then they may not be adhering to the right laws and regulations that they're supposed to be. So that's usually the first thing, is we make sure they're working with a good lawyer. Other things we look for in companies we work with is just working with good people that can execute. There's a lot of people that are trying to do ICOs But it's important for us and to maintain our reputation to work with people that are trying to do things in the right way and can execute on actually building out the projects they're promising to build. And so those are two of the main things that we typically look for.
And I know, Solomon, you're still pretty early, but maybe if you could talk about, I think you have some legal advisors and just talk about the groundwork that you've put in so far.
So early on, I think one of the approaches that we took, which I think was a right decision, was we reached out to legal advisors. And this is before we even started drafting our white paper. This was helpful because we saved a lot of sort of time and capital as well, because we knew exactly what kind of token structure we need and what kind of token structure is legally allowed for us to be implementable. We're working with Cooley now, and I think for anyone getting involved in the ICO space, the very first sort of approach that should be taken, I think even before the development, is whether the token economics, are those legally implementable? And if you have those figured out, and that's where I also met Mason, because we were reaching out to TokenSoft as well. If you have your legal base covered, that's where you can start building more on your development. You can expand your team. You can sort of reach out for funds, for capital. So approach that we took was early on, we reached out to a lot of legal advisors. And besides Cooley, we also have our board of advisors who are from the legal space, from different companies. We also have a part-time lawyer on board, which I think is very helpful because we can now reach out to Cooley or the law firms with everyday questions. So
I think you pointed out something actually really interesting is sometimes people start going, they write their white paper, they want to start the ICO, they get a lawyer a little bit too early, and what happens is that the way they structure the project and the way the token works doesn't really pass through legal. And so that's interesting you said that, because that's really what is make or break for the project. They're either like possible within frameworks or they're not possible. So it's good to understand that as soon as possible.
Yeah, and the subject of this panel specifically is Insider's Guide to ICOs. So I should probably reflect back on my experiences with ICOs, because it goes back a long time. We could go back all the way to the first ICO was something called Mastercoin. And back then, there was no Ethereum, there were no smart contracts, so it was a very different environment. And therefore, Mastercoin, unfortunately, didn't get any traction. Fast forward to, so that was 2013. 2014, Ethereum was launched, or at least the concept of Ethereum was presented to people in a white paper. And then that was done as a ICO or a crowdfund, whatever. Back then, ICO wasn't really a term; it was more crowdfunding. And then Ethereum kind of slogged along for a while, and Augur happened, which was built on Ethereum. It originally was supposed to be built on Bitcoin, and that happened on Ethereum. And then Ethereum sort of matured, and nobody really knew what Ethereum was going to become in 2014. World computer, smart contracts, all these different, the blockchain, cryptocurrency, all these, nobody really knew what it was going to be. And then with Augur, doing it on Ethereum, doing a crowd sale, or then what they were starting to call an ICO or an initial coin offering, there was this platform now called Ethereum where you could ICOs. And so this company that I have now, Pactum Capital, actually, we were doing a decentralized derivatives project on Ethereum, and we built a concept, we wrote a white paper, we got legal, we got marketing, we had developers, and we were going to do an ICO. But we found out when we presented this idea to Vitalik and the Ethereum Foundation that Ethereum simply wasn't ready for something like this. It just wouldn't scale. There wouldn't be enough transactions. There wasn't any ability to bring data into Ethereum to actually do derivatives. So I basically got a different co-founder and changed it into this centralized financial services company that I do today. So I worked on this all for 2016, and I never did an ICO, but I've advised many ICOs. Most recently was Mobius, which was one of the first stellar ICOs that raised $39 million for what they actually don't call it an ICO. David was supposed to be here to talk about it, but he couldn't make it. But essentially what they did is they offered a token for a dApp store, which they believe is a product, not a security, not an ICO. So it was a token product offering, which was unique. It was one of the first to do that. So I go through this whole story just to explain. We went from Bitcoin to Ethereum. Now we're on Stellar. If you guys would talk about, because I know both of you have explored Ethereum and Stellar. You didn't explore Bitcoin, of course, because we've learned that doesn't work for crowdfunding. But if you guys would talk about Ethereum and Stellar and where we're at today. Wow, that was like an Adam Draper, long-winded. All right, I gotta take a break.
So I think this goes back to this major concern of what are entrepreneurs sort of assuming, or what are they expecting? When we started working on HelloFriend, we were an Ethereum-based platform. Our initial goal was to get done with our white paper in a week. That took us more than a month, getting all the technical details right. And as soon as we had our white paper, which we shared with consensus, it turned out that it's not scalable. And then we moved on to Stellar. Now, very suddenly, out of nowhere, another month is being spent on another white paper. So it took us another month getting Stellar white paper ready, getting in touch with Jed himself, the core development team at Stellar, just making sure that a consumer application is actually implementable on Stellar. And this goes to another point, which I think is very important, and something that we made sure to do at HelloFriend was that any protocol or any technology that we were using at HelloFriend, we reached out to their inventors, we reached out to their founders, just to make sure that, again, it's implementable. It was a mistake that wouldn't do the same process with Ethereum. We should have reached out to someone there, perhaps not Vitalik, but someone there, but we did not do that. So I would really recommend reaching out to the people who are either developing that technology or who are actually very much knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Stellar, so yeah, traditionally everyone was doing these ICOs on Ethereum, and that's where this really took off. And then I think it was late last year we started seeing demand for ICOs on Stellar. So actually Mobius was one of the first ones we talked to, and then just here and there we kept hearing things. And so I think as of last month there were 6 ICOs on Stellar. And so it's becoming a popular platform for people to do ICOs on. And we actually launched Stellar support a month ago as well, so for incoming payments as well as for the token, because we did start seeing more and more demand. And we're noticing that the types of people that are opting for Stellar and Ethereum are so they're usually like more established entrepreneurs that are coming to the space and looking at these blockchains objectively. They're looking at the Ethereum blockchain and they're looking at like the transactional throughput, the functionality, what's possible on top of it. Then they're looking at Stellar and they're saying, oh, well, I can do much higher throughputs. There's a decentralized exchange in there. And so the people that are newer to the space, that are looking objectively, are typically opting for Stellar. And I think that's an interesting trend that's been coming up for me, because I never would have thought to do ICOs on Stellar before until I actually looked into it.
One of the big challenges that I see when I advise these ICOs, crowdfunding, let me go back for a minute, okay? So the term ICO, okay? I hated the term ICO. I didn't like it. It sounded too much like IPO, okay? But there is a regulatory body in DC called Coin Center, and they resisted this idea of calling it an ICO as well. And we're donators to Coin Center. And I talked to them and they said, listen, we're gonna have to call this ICOs. We've lost the battle. We have to call it ICOs. That's just what everybody knows it as. So I just wanted to preface it with that. I prefer crowdfunding. I prefer that because ICO sounds like an IPO, sounds like a security. I don't think all of these are securities. Many of them probably are, some of them aren't. But what I wanted to say is this idea of a security versus a product like what Mobius does, or perhaps what HelloFriend is doing. Mason, if you could talk a little bit about your thoughts on that, and then, of course, Salman.
You want to go first?
Maybe you should go first.
Sure. So I think this is again, that's a good question, and something that entrepreneurs should realize or should figure this point very early on. Because if you're reaching out to the regulatory bodies, if you're reaching out to legal companies, to become their client, the very first question that they will ask is about your token economics. What's the structure? Where is your token being used? Now, there's again a lot of debate going on between whether a token is a security or a utility. We took a very conservative approach where we early on realized that we are just not going to get into this debate. We're going to call ourselves a securities token. If that bounds us from not doing a public token sale, sure enough, because we don't want to spend a lot of time or a lot of capital on chasing sort of public investors instead of building the actual product. So that is something that we did. It was a very conservative approach, and so I think you have to make, there's opportunity cost. You can go with a public token sale, but again, there's a lot of work. You have to figure out your token economics, which we thought was not worth, at least in the early stages.
I have a strong opinion here, so I'm just going to limit the scope of what I'm going to say. So we only do, like, if they're U.S.-based companies, they have to do and they offer the sale in the U.S. They have to do it under what's called a Regulation B offering, which means that you're offering it as a security, if it's a token or a SAFT or whatever. And so I think one thing that's interesting is, so before there was the dynamic that you're either doing a utility token, meaning you're openly selling the token without checking for, without basically selling it to anyone, or if you were doing a security token, meaning you could only sell it to accredited investors, and obviously that raised the bar for who you could sell it to. And then more recently, one interesting trend that happened was, before the outstanding question was, can a security convert to a utility? So let's say you're doing a security sale today under Regulation D. Can you have a more open sale later? So I think one interesting trend that happened recently is Jay Clayton came out and said, yeah, absolutely, a security can convert to a utility.
The chairman of the SEC, Jay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And so I'll just reduce the scope of my comments there. So I think there's some more, there's a sort of broader dynamic that's kind of interesting, is if you do a security token now, if you do launch the platform later, and theoretically, and the token can operate sort of as a utility token, that you can do a more open sale. So that avenue is sort of maturing a little bit, and I think that's really sort of one of the fundamental things that's going to basically set the dynamic for the sales in the next year.
Do we have time for any questions? Okay. Yeah, let's get some questions, because I know that this is a tough topic, and we had a couple of, I know we had one guy in the back that wants to do an ICO, and I'm sure he's got a question. Maybe he's changed his mind. He probably has changed his mind. Go ahead. Get a mic.
Hey, so, everybody says get a good liar, but how much does it cost and how long does it take?
That's a very good question. Again, this again goes back to the point of the opportunity cost, because the way I see it is that there's this catch-22 where you want to do a token sale so that you can get some funds to get a lawyer, but you cannot do a token sale without a lawyer. So. And it's a broader point, because what that has done, this regulatory framework, this uncertainty, is that a lot of early stage projects are moving towards venture capitals. I mean, that's what we did. We could not do a token sale and without a lawyer. Again, this catch-22. So, and then we reach out to venture capitals. Now, again, this is sort of fundamentally against the idea of doing an ICO, because you were not supposed to go to a venture capital firm. But that is what's going on right now. And it's expensive. I mean, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,100 an hour. As an early stage company, you cannot afford it.
It'll range 150 to 600.
And this is something you tell your clients to expect, right, as they come on board?
Yeah, a healthy budget is usually 2 to 5 million. I recently heard a quote from a very prominent law firm that they do these for $1 million, which I have yet to verify.
So when we got counsel for it was called Velocity, the legal costs were not as expensive because it was so new that the law firms were really interested in learning about how to do these things. Now that there's a track record, there's a few firms that are really good at this stuff, and they charge quite a bit. So it is a tough situation.
Just a quick note on, so when this is early last year, we reached out to a couple of law firms to see if they have any blockchain support. Our meeting was scheduled for 45 minutes. The first 30 minutes were spent me trying to explain what blockchain is and how it works. And their viewpoint was that you tell us how it works, and then we'll find loopholes. Now I think it's getting much better, where they actually understand how blockchain works. So,
Questions?
Let's take one more question. Matthew?
Quick question. Now, touch on the fact that say we correct the SEC.
Yeah, let's get a mic so everybody can hear.
All right, so say we go with a Reg D, even a Reg S, compliant with the SEC. Have you encountered any issues with other nations now by offering the securities, by being a U.S. company? What can we expect? Because we're having an ICO here shortly as well.
Yeah, you should aim to be compliant in every jurisdiction that you're launching your sale in. Anywhere that you expect a purchaser, you should be compliant in that country. But I've seen them structured in different ways. So I've also seen them structured as it's a U.S. sale, regulated sale, and if people from overseas come purchase it from a U.S. company, then they're subject to U.S. laws. Yeah, there's different ways I see it structured. Yeah.
One more?
Yeah, sure. Let me just throw something at you and then get your take on it quickly, because I know we're getting ready to wait for a very important presentation coming up. But so most ICOs that are being done, like statistically speaking, are pre-seed firms, yes? So maybe a pre-seed firm shouldn't be raising $20 million. Maybe they should raise about $1 million, which you can do under Reg CF with almost no legal compliance costs whatsoever. Hire an attorney and pay them that way. What's your thought on that?
Mason?
So yeah, so is the question like, should they be raising that much, or what was the CF element?
If you're worried about people getting locked out of the market because they can't pay for their fucking expensive attorneys, raise $1 million, pay the attorney to come and do a good legally compliant ICO, and then raise the $50 million.
Yeah. So I don't know if like Reg CF is the best option, because then you have like a lot of purchasers, but they have like very small checks. We also see people raise just traditional venture capital and then use that funding to go do the ICO, and I think that has a little bit more teeth to it.
Isn't it hard to get a lot of small investors to, then they have to get the cryptocurrency, and isn't that a challenge as well?
There's really good platforms like Republic that make it really easy, where you can do a regulation CF for $1 million.
So I completely agree with that point. For early stage companies, this is a pre-seed. And that's what we did at HelloFriend. We reached out to venture capitals. Then after raising money, we reached out to different clients, Coolly, etc., just to make sure that if we do decide to do a token sale, which we are right now, we have the funds to actually do it. There are different ways. If you're reaching out to a VC firm, it's very unlikely that they'll come solely on tokens. Another approach that VCs are taking these days is called SAFT-E, where you sort of divide your principal amount between tokens and equity, which I think is a lot safer. Pillar is one of the VCs who's leading this approach. So I think the different ways, but I agree. It's better for you to raise some money early on, either if that's on equity or tokens, then move on to a broader sale.
Are we going to get one more? Brett, I thought you were going to cut me off, man.
Mine's just building off of your question.
Okay, sounds good.
Mine's a really small question, just building off of your question. I've heard, though, that Reg CF, if you can only raise $1 million, that sometimes the KYC and setting up the funding portal and all of the administrative burden actually costs more than you can actually raise.
Do it on an existing funding portal, like
Okay.
Fair to say that you'll be addressing some of those issues, or you can't.
I'm not going to talk about it.
No, that's a good point. That's if you structure it yourself, but yeah, you can use a platform that I'm sure has a reasonable business model for a company.
All right, I think we're out of time, so we're going to be here if anybody wants to come talk to us. Hopefully, good luck with your projects. I assume some of you are interested in this, so I hope this was useful.
Big round of applause.
Thank you.
For the panel.
Thank you.